And it's good to see you at the front for a change. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
And the brothers at the back, assalamu alaikum to you as well. Respected scholars and guests, it's terribly unfair when you're asked to speak and there is still that was Hazel Blaze making sure it wasn't recorded. It was me making sure Hazel doesn't hear what I've got to say. Look, it's always difficult to speak to an audience which includes Dr. Osama in the audience and my esteemed brother and respected elder, Professor Sadiq Ramadan as well, and so many sisters. But it is a challenge that I'm really pleased to be asked to take on. So, assalamu alaikum to you all. May the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon you all. It's great to be here, and this is a groundbreaking conference, and I'm pleased to be able to take part in a groundbreaking conference dealing with what are incredibly important and topical issues. But let me start by congratulating the Inspire team for all their hard work in putting together this event, a conference organised by women, for women, that is forward-looking, in a location that should be and is at the heart of the community, and I think it's a tremendous achievement. The topic I've been asked to speak about is one called Your Country Needs You. Now, for those of you who watch BBC television on a Saturday night will know that Graham Norton and Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber are currently going through the task of choosing the song that represents the UK in the Eurovision Song Contest. And unfortunately, the title of that programme is Your Country Needs You. So when I was first asked to do this talk, I got slightly nervous. There are lots of things I'm willing to do for HMG, but to help us get a song that wins the Eurovision Song Contest is not one that I'd really want to do on a Saturday afternoon. But the second equally disturbing thing when I looked at the title of my speech was, you'll remember, those of you who study history, those posters that we see in our history books of Winston Churchill with a cigar, with the finger pointing, saying, your country needs you. So I'm pleased to say that I'm not going to talk about either of those two things, but I'm going to talk about what I think is a really relevant topic for British Muslim women in 2009, especially in the current climate, which you'll all be well aware of. Now, you all know, and it's trite for me to say it, but I'll say it, on a micro and a macro level, you are needed. Muslim women are needed to fulfill their potential for your own individual benefits, for the benefits of your families, for the benefit of your local community, for the city or region that you live in. Our country, and it's our country, needs all of us, all of you, to maximise your potential, and especially some of the untapped talent that exists amongst British Muslim women. And frankly, our planet needs you. Now, there's a massive elephant in the room that I've got to just mention about briefly, which is Gaza. Now, look, all of us have a number of emotions that we feel. Frustration, depression. We've now entered the third week of the tragedy that's unfolding, and you know, there are a number of choices you have with the frustration you feel. One of the choices you have is to roll over and have apathy and be cynical and to just walk away. Nothing you can do will make a difference. But frustration can be double-edged. And the other motivator that frustration can lead to is activism and getting involved. And you know, on a macro level, we have Gaza, but on a micro level, you might be frustrated about the housing you live in. You may be frustrated about your lack of employment prospects or the prospects of those in your family. You may be frustrated about crime on your doorstep, or about the quality of our leadership, as imperfect as it is, or about foreign policy, like I said. And as I look around the room today, one of the reasons why I agreed to speak at this conference was because I know, because I see it every day, and I know looking around this room that we have a huge amount of talent that all of you together represent. And it's all inspiring. I speak as a father of two gorgeous daughters, 9 and 7, and you are their role models. And it's you I'm relying upon to walk the path in whose footsteps they will follow. And I do, as I look around, feel a tremendous sense of pride as a Muslim, as someone who's British, and yes, as somebody who is a minister of the talent that exists, a lot of it untapped in our community. So for me, all of you today represent nothing less than the spirit of those role models. And Dr. Osama talked briefly about them. He only had a short amount of time to do so, that we've had before us, whether it's the entrepreneurship of Hazrat Khadija, radiallahu anha, of the knowledge and wisdom of Aisha, or the steadfastness of Fatima. And turning my mind to the title of my talk in these troubled times, whether it's economic or otherwise, the enormous pool of talent that you represent means your country, of course, it needs you. It needs your professionalism, it needs your commitment, it needs your dedication to making Britain better, fairer, and more just at home and overseas as well. But we have to recognise that whilst so many of you are in this hall anyway, are at the top of your profession, there is a different truth that must be spoken. The truth is many British Muslim, and the Muslim women I'm talking of, many of them aren't here, couldn't have access to come to a meeting like this, face significant barriers to succeeding than other members of our society. A recent report on Muslim women in the labour market makes the sober reading. The report showed 51% of second generation British Muslim women, those born, raised and educated in the UK, are inactive in the labour market, compared, for example, to 17% of second generation Hindu women. 13% are unemployed, compared to 4%, for example, of second generation Hindu women. In 2007, British women of Pakistani and Bangladeshi origin earned 56% of the average hourly rate of British white men. Muslim women are the least likely of all religious groups to be working in management and senior official jobs, and 43% of Muslim women interviewed stated they felt they were treated differently or encountered discrimination at interviews because they were British Muslim. But it's not just about economics. In politics, whilst we see at least 4 Muslim women in the House of Lords, including Baroness Udine is from this area and has been a friend and a mentor to me for many years, we only have 2 black women MPs and no Muslim women MPs. And the challenges for British Muslim women don't stop there. My recent Fabian booklet was very kindly referred to. I called it Fairness, Not Favours. And I clearly outlined the fact that we can't talk about fairness in our society without addressing the issue of equality for British Muslim women. And it remains a difficult truth that whilst women's rights have increased as a whole in society generally, we still face challenges in achieving gender equality in numerous areas. In the case of British Muslim women, I'm fully aware that you often face multiple levels of challenges. One, that all women in general society face, and an additional one, as a Muslim, whether that's discrimination you may suffer because of the way you dress or because of your social habits. We're all aware of the discrimination Muslims face in the labour market due to their faith, and that's one of the reasons we introduced in the UK and we have in the UK some of the best anti-discrimination legislation on the grounds of religion anywhere in the world. And it's not stopped. There'll be more legislation that I'll talk about shortly. But you know, there's another tier and a reason for the multiple levels of discrimination you suffer. And we've got to face up to it, and we can't duck it. There's the additional challenge we face from within our own communities of discrimination. And what I enjoyed most about Osama's talk was the fact that, you know, we would have the candor to face up to some of the challenges we face and look for elucidation in some of the text that we know exists and some of the pragmatic progressive teachers that there now exist. Now, I'm absolutely clear that a failure to deal with the inequalities of British Muslim women would fly in the face of any attempts to build a socially just and fair society. The point I make and my colleagues in government make to me is, you know, the reason why this issue is important isn't because we need Muslim women's votes, although it's quite nice when you give them to us. It's not just because we're worried that if we don't help you, you will somehow not help in the fight to tackle extremism and radicalisation, which are important, but it's just the right and just thing to do if you believe in certain type of politics that members of my government, I hope, believe in. But it also has serious consequences for preventing extremism, as you'll have seen. I know that DCI Fiona Niven has already talked about the role that Muslim women can play in PVE, but it's worth reminding ourselves that the majority of the extremist and radical ideologies that lead young men, and they are young men by and large, to turn themselves into human bombs are deeply misogynist. And so I think that candour is one that I think it's important that we have. Now, British Muslim leaders and opinion formers, in my view, must also be united in their condemnation, and they have been in the recent past, of practices such as honour killing, forced marriages, female circumcision. We've seen that, and they have a positive duty to educate their communities about these issues. And you know, one of the things that pains me as somebody who works in communities, not just in Tooting, but around the country, is the ignorance about the noble traditions of our Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the honouring and empowering he gave to women and never degrading them. You know, British Muslim organisations who play leadership roles should also be willing to take bold steps about putting women's rights before community politics. I'll give you one example. Recently, there was an attempt to try and have Muslim marriage contracts. For those of you who don't know, if you have a nikah that's not performed where it's registered and recognised in British courts, you are treated as a common law spouse, which means the rights you have as somebody who's a divorcee are no stronger than the rights that a girlfriend would have if she broke up with a boyfriend, whereas if you're married, you have far greater rights. And I was disappointed, I have to be clear, about the unwillingness of some Muslim organisations to take a lead in this and to object to moves to have Muslim marriage contracts that would have helped deal with a huge bit of unfairness in our own society. But above all, in my opinion, British Muslim women should not face barriers to playing a full role both in the Muslim communities but also, and more importantly, in wider society. British Muslim women need to have, must have, and are more and more having the right to play a positive role in their communities. And you know, our communities include our mosques and community centres, and I'm pleased that today's pioneering conference is being held at the LMC in a mosque and community centre to demonstrate that with British Muslim women playing a full role in communities, the path to success for all British Muslims will both be easier and more complete. Now, I've outlined the challenges that British Muslim women face, not to dampen your spirits or add to the frustrations you feel about what's happening overseas, but to raise them and to give us all hope, because once you know the size of the mountain, it makes it easier to climb, whether it's Everest or living in the UK in 2009. So yes, notwithstanding what Graham Norton, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Winston Churchill said, your country and your society does need you. That means that we all have to work together to overcome any barriers and any challenges. Let me be clear, the responsibility for overcoming those challenges should not, must not fall just on the shoulders of British Muslim women. Although you have an important and a huge role to play, they also fall on the rest of us, whether we are Muslim or non-Muslim, whether we are male or female. So what do I give you from the government? Well, from the government we promise you the most comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation in the world to protect all British citizens, including Muslim women. The Single Equality Act is currently being drafted. You need to be interested in this and involved in its formulation and how it passes into legislation to make sure we do the best we can as lawmakers. The Equalities and Human Rights Commission is there to help British citizens with multiple identities achieving fairer treatment in society. For too long, Muslim women were left unprotected by race and gender.